The second issue in the case against RPD was whether officer faces could be redacted from body cam footage.
You have these self-proclaimed vigilantes, or whatever you want to call them. I know some of our particular small jurisdictions got hit by some of these popular kind of YouTubers.
At this time, we will go ahead and invite Dr. Robert Conrad, the Secretary of the Nevada Open Government Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us, and I appreciate your patience as we get through these hearings. We've just had a lot of guests that had different commitments today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope to be brief. It's been a long afternoon, so thank you all for sticking around. Thank you, Madam Chair Torres and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us to present today. My name is Bob Conrad, and I'm on the Nevada Open Government Coalition. I'm also a board member of the Nevada Press Association, and I am editor and publisher of thisisreno.com, which is a news source for the greater Reno area. I'm speaking, though, today on behalf of the Nevada Open Government Coalition. The nonpartisan coalition is comprised of journalists, attorneys, academics, members of nonprofit organizations, and open government advocates. Each group and our board members regularly interface with government entities, whether they are local school districts or state of Nevada agencies. And each is also profoundly concerned with how these agencies are handling their responsibility as stewards of public resources. Today, I'm going to briefly discuss the realities of trying to get public records from government agencies. Public records are the gateway to seeing how taxpayer resources are actually being spent or managed. Public records-based news reporting has regularly uncovered government practices that agencies would prefer remain in the dark, and I have numerous examples. Public records are vital to counteracting the one-sided narrative so prominently advanced by government agencies. These agencies craft and maintain a singular positive image of their activities. I welcome you to follow almost any government agency on social media to see what I mean. Public records, however, tell the rest of the story. Excuse me. One example is Tesla selling its tax credits to the MGM. That story was published on This Is Reno in 2016, but it was the result of very difficult efforts trying to get public records from the Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development. It all started because GOED, at the time, refused to answer questions about transferable tax credits. The source for those answers, however, were in the public records. But it wasn't until after arguing with the agency, hiring legal counsel, and waiting for months that GOED finally produced the records that I requested. Because of that story, which was picked up by national media, an audit was requested of Tesla's deal with the state. Transferable tax credits have since received more scrutiny by this body since that time. State law is very clear that government records are presumed to be open to the public. It is more common, however, that local government agencies put up numerous barriers to public records requesters. Some agencies even hire law firms to deny public records requests and to fight court battles. It is a severe problem, and it is contrary to the Nevada Public Records Act and associated case law, which mandates any exceptions to disclose records must be viewed extremely narrowly. And it's not just a problem for the news media. Citizens often cannot get records they may need for insurance purposes, legal reasons, or simply to verify basic information. Nonprofits, attorneys, environmental organizations, and many, many others face barriers to getting government records. Even elected officials such as yourselves are denied access to records about the very people they are meant to oversee. In my role with This Is Reno, I currently have pending litigation against the Reno Police Department and 2 cases against the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. Each of these cases was filed for 2 reasons. One is that the agencies frequently refuse to answer even the most simple of questions to fact-check or verify information. The other reason is that these agencies improperly responded to public records requests with excessive redactions, months and months of delays, or simply refusing to release the records at all. One of my cases against the Reno Police Department was decided in the Nevada State Court last year, as mentioned earlier today. The court ruled on two significant issues. One is that law enforcement agencies, such as the Reno Police Department, cannot deny or close public records requests by claiming that all open investigations are automatically private. Despite prevailing on this issue, Reno Police and the Washoe County Sheriff's Office still deny any records until an investigation is completely closed, merely by citing the longstanding Don Ray of Nevada v. Bradshaw decision. The Reno City Attorney recently said in court, despite this ruling, that if an investigation is open, they will not release records. That is not what Don Ray says. In fact, it said law enforcement essentially must have a good reason to keep an open investigation private. My case against RPD confirmed that. The second issue in the case against RPD was whether officer faces could be redacted from body cam footage. This is Reno, with support from this Open Government Coalition, the Nevada Press Association, and others, argued that body cam redaction should be limited. George Floyd's killing at the hands of Minneapolis police was cited as a key reason for making body cam footage accessible. Unfortunately, the Nevada Supreme Court found the Nevada Peace Officers' Bill of Rights trumped the Nevada Public Records Act. That Bill of Rights says that unless a law enforcement officer expressly permits his photograph to be released to the public, law enforcement agencies do not have to produce those images. And here's what that looks like. That means officer faces are routinely redacted from body cam footage. When body cams were rolled out to the public at great taxpayer expense, the promise was that they would encourage better officer behavior, increase transparency, and foster accountability. The reality today is far different. And in this image here, I would like to call attention to the fact that even though that court ruling said that law enforcement agencies can redact officer faces, what you're seeing here is redactions of the faces of medics who are not employed by the sheriff's office. What is happening now is that taxpayers are paying for extreme levels of redactions. Officers are also bypassing transparency by signaling to one another to turn off their cameras. They're muting audio to avoid disclosing what they are talking about, and agencies are requesting excessive fees before body cam footage is released. This is a problem across the country and one that needs to be addressed. ProPublica last year reported that body cam footage frequently contradicts police narratives, and that had Minneapolis officer Derek Chauvin's history of violent behavior, which was documented on his own body cam, had that been addressed, George Floyd would still be alive. ProPublica said, "The footage was left in the control of a department where impunity reigned." ProPublica also quoted an attorney saying that Chauvin should have been fired in 2017. I will close with one last example. As you may know, the Clark County School District denied a records request for school police body cam footage. The ACLU of Nevada sued to get those records. Sure enough, after an extensive court battle, back up this slide here, what was revealed is that the school district lied about what had actually occurred during an incident with students. Officers were caught lying, and taxpayers footed the bill for the district's records denial. They continue to challenge that, according to this article in yesterday's Las Vegas Sun. The executive director of the ACLU said, basically, it was clear the district lied and police officers fabricated a reason to stop and accost children. I suspect these kinds of situations happen far more often than any of us get to know about. I hope the points today are clear. Government agencies consistently go to great lengths to avoid making records public. Citizens and decision makers such as yourselves remain in the dark when Nevada's public records laws are so routinely abused around the state. It is an uphill battle because, to date, the only remedy is to file costly public records lawsuits, and those take years to resolve. What is perhaps most offensive is that taxpayers pay for this. Government attorneys have far more time and greater resources to battle records cases, even on flimsy grounds, and I believe they do this because they can. Case law frequently shows those agencies are going to lose in court, but these attorneys and agency managers let expenses pile up anyway. In short, there is no incentive for government agencies to follow the letter and the spirit of public records laws, so they do not. It is our hope that legislative action is taken to disincentivize abuses of the Nevada Public Records Act. We look forward to working with you in the future so that these issues can be fixed. I'm happy to take any questions, and I thank you for your time and for sticking around in this meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Conrad, for your presentation. And so first I'll go to Northern Nevada and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm all by myself up here now, so. And not really a question so much. I mean, a lot of what the gentleman is talking about, in some fashion, I've experienced in record requests that I've made. They had to take Washoe County School District to court and those types of things. We won. But on the other side is a comment. And I know some people have a great deal of anxiety about it on the 130 plus exemptions that are listed out. I remember the bill. And there's probably another 100 plus in regulation. I don't know if you're aware of that as well, but in regulation. But at the same time, I think some of the efforts that have been put out by some organizations to get information on, what a retiree under the public employees retirement system is getting, have gone too far. In other words, public employees didn't sign up for that stuff. You may have a different opinion on that. But I agree with you that, and I can give one example. I was in a rural county, I think it was Eureka, and I stopped in and asked for some information at the county clerk's office, and the lady's response to me was, "Who are you?" And I answered her, I says, "I'm John Q. Public." I said, "No, my name is Skip Daly." I said, and she said, "Well, what do you want it for?" And I restrained myself and told her, although my first thought was, none of your damn business. So I understand some of the things that you go through on what the public records requests and things are, and we do need to fix some things, but we have to balance it against some of the other concerns that people have out there. And the redacting in the faces, they should redact the faces. Should be able to see the badge number, though.
If I can respond just briefly, I should note that across the country,
Yes, and just if you could please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Bob Conrad for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can comment in response, across the country, most body cam footage is not redacted. You can go on YouTube, look up most any jurisdiction, and you'll find body cam footage of police activities where there are not redactions of officer faces. I actually field complaints from out-of-state media outlets wondering why Nevada does it this way, and unfortunately, I kind of have to tell them it's partly my fault.
Thank you. And Senator Daly, do you have any additional questions or follow-ups?
No, I'm good. I mean, we could go on for hours about it, but I'm good.
You got all day. That's why I do these meetings in the afternoon, Senator. Members, any questions here in Southern Nevada?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for your presentation. I really do appreciate it. I know that sometimes, so every single session we have this conversation. And I'm saying that as somebody who's not been here that long. I know folk, well, before I was ever even considering running, we're talking about this. And we're always having this balancing act with what is an abuse and, just folk out there who are trying to make it impossible for small jurisdictions to kind of operate local government versus, what are we actually hiding from the public and where do we navigate that? I'm just curious, with some of our smaller jurisdictions, I'm assuming you've probably been involved in, at some point, some conversation with them, either in a lawsuit and or requesting information. But I'm just curious to know, because I know one of the complaints I'll often hear is anybody who wants to have, you know, if we want to push the line towards transparency versus non, that, you know, they'll make the argument that you're on the side of just, you want absolute transparency and you're not reasonable. And I know that's not true, by the way. I'm not making that accusation. But could you give some insight in what you've seen in other states, particularly when it comes to that issue where you have these self-proclaimed vigilantes or whatever you want to call them, where they're out there being disruptive with local government. And then I know there's a lot of that gets put up on social media, and they're just doing it for the purposes of kind of causing some tension and then giving themselves some likes, right? And challenging different local jurisdictions. And so I've had local jurisdictions tell me, kind of point to that and show me some evidence. I know some of our particular small jurisdictions got hit by some of these popular kind of YouTubers who do that, and they cited that as an example. But I'm just curious to know, in what you've seen, you've been involved in this, you've been in the trenches more than probably most humans in this room. Just how do you respond to that, and where do you kind of draw the line of reason?
Bob Conrad for the record. Thank you, Vice Chair Flores. I believe you're referring to the First Amendment auditors. I personally have not had any experience with them. I know there are some in the Reno-Carson area, and I believe I can't speak for them, but I believe what they're trying to do is to ultimately educate government employees about what is and is not open access to government facilities. That's not really my area of expertise, so I'm hesitant to comment more on that. But I do know in many cases around the country, those First Amendment auditors often prevail in court when ultimately what they've done is being tested. Typically, it's a government employee, well, like the senator just mentioned, the employee in, I believe, did you say Ely or Eureka? Yeah, asking questions, which frankly, with respect to the Nevada Public Records Act, are fairly invasive and inappropriate. It doesn't matter why you're requesting a record or who you are. Those records are open to the public. So I'm a little hesitant to speak on the First Amendment auditors. I don't know any. I've never witnessed any, but I believe their intent is to push the boundaries of what is acceptable to videotape, for instance, in a government facility.
And thank you. And I really did mean it more of a softball question, because I understand that that's a few humans who do that, right? The idea that the floodgates are going to open, people are just going to go out there and just test the limits of what a FOIA can do. I just don't think that's real. And that's really all I was getting at, because I know I'll get that sometimes, that there's just this like line of human beings waiting to just, in a saturated way, start demanding things for no reason, just because they can. And I just don't know that that's something that we actually see. And I just wanted to get your take on that. But I meant it more of the softball question than anything else.
Thank you, Bob Conrad again, Vice Chair Flores. I used to be a public information officer, and I developed public records policies for state agencies here in Nevada. And I took public records seriously as a PIO, and I take them seriously as a journalist. It can and is offensive when people do extremely voluminous records requests just because. I know that does happen, and I believe there's been some cases in Washoe County. I haven't followed them super closely, but I do agree that there is a limit there, and I don't know the answer to that, and speaking on behalf of the Open Government Coalition, it might be something that we would need to explore and address, perhaps with this committee.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And I think that's every single time we have this come up, we go in that direction, because if we don't have that, unfortunately, it really would be impossible for some folk to meet some of those requirements. And I know a couple local jurisdictions, in fact, as I was sitting here, got a message reminding me of a couple of scenarios, but I appreciate that. And it is ultimately the worst of all fears right? We throw the worst hypotheticals in both directions, and then it just makes it very difficult for us to continue to fall right in the middle of that. But I appreciate your insight, and we'll have this conversation again next session for sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Chair Flores. If I may, Bob Conrad for the record. It's actually in statute that when an agency gets a voluminous records request, that agency's responsibility is to help perhaps the requester narrow what it is they're looking for. And candidly, I rarely see that on my end.
Thank you, Dr. Conrad. And since Vice Chair Flores asked you a softball question, I'm going to ask you a baseball question. But my question specifically is just like, based off of the issues that you've kind of highlighted throughout your presentation today, and, just for members of the public, I'll make sure, our staff will make sure that those are posted on Nellis this afternoon. But based off of that presentation, what needs to be done, or what recommendations does Nevada for Open Government Coalition have on how we can, both make government more accessible, but then also prevent some of those like bad actors, as you mentioned, saying like, you don't need that voluminous of a request. Like, how do we narrow it down?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a member of the Open Government Coalition and Nevada Press Association, we are now discussing how to address some of these issues. We have not made any headway on any discussion. It's just being talked about now. So I'm hesitant to make any specific policy recommendations. I will tell you that based on what other members have had to deal with, particularly in the Las Vegas area, is that agencies, as I mentioned before, are disincentivized to follow the law, which is why in that slide you saw that I believe it was Las Vegas Metro and Clark County spent more than $500,000 battling public records cases. To me, the case law and the Nevada Public Records Act are fairly clear. And what I've seen in Clark County and also in my own cases is that government attorneys will take little slivers of something in a case that they have actually lost, and they will turn that on its head and make it seem like, oh, here's an exemption, and they will fight tooth and nail for that. I got one today in my inbox where it was just strange. The Henderson Corrections Officer case, you may be familiar with that. The group tried to get the Review Journal to remove a video off of their website, and they cited my case. My case says nothing about a news media source redacting officer faces. It was the most bizarre legal argument I've ever seen, but it was actually fairly consistent with what we see across the state, which is Don Ray was a case, I believe it was City of Reno and Reno Police lost. They still cite it, though, as an exemption to the Nevada Public Records Act inappropriately, and they do it regularly. That case, I believe, was decided in 1990. And they cite it for something that it doesn't actually mean. It's very strange.
Thank you. And I guess, like, from my perspective, just taking all that information in, it becomes an issue, right? Because it becomes a costly, lengthy process in order to get the information that is requested. And so if the argument is, like, let's go to court every single time, then, I mean, for many people, like that might have actual information that they need for a viable reason, for a viable case, or for information for, the media's sake, then it becomes a challenge and an undue burden to access it. And so who would have access to that would be very limited, right? Because, maybe Nevadans for Open Government have the abilities and the means to retain an attorney, but many Nevadan families wouldn't have that same access if they needed that information. And so that there becomes a barrier. To your knowledge, is there any appeals process, or is all those cases then have to go through the courts, correct?
Madam Chair, Bob Conrad again for the record. Yes, the only redress for the issue here is to file a petition in district court. And that in and of itself is very burdensome. In Washoe County, I know of very few attorneys who take records cases, let alone take them on a contingency basis. So that is challenge number one, finding the right person to do it. on the board of the Nevada Open Government Coalition. We have a superb attorney, Maggie McCletchie, who does take these cases. I believe she works a lot with the Review Journal. As an independent news publisher, I don't have the resources to file petitions in district court. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that district court judges frequently seem unaware, or perhaps they just seem unaware of the Public Records Act and what it means. And I'd like to give you an example. The Washoe County Sheriff's Office, when you file a public records request with them, they automatically respond and say, we will get back to you in 30 days. The Nevada Public Records Act mandates 5 days. So automatically they're giving themselves an extension. We are currently in litigation in the state court over that because we believe that 5 days actually means 5 days, not when they get around to it within a 30-day time period. And the Nevada system of higher ed engages in that same practice as well. So to answer your question, the only tool to get this fixed is litigation, and that is out of reach for most people. And I consider myself very fortunate. I've had 2 attorneys since I've been a news publisher that I've worked with who have been exceptional and very generous, and they take my cases because they believe these issues are important, and they believe a lot of the records denials that I've faced are just simply unlawful. So I'm very fortunate. I don't have a budget to do this, but that's the only way to get out of this. So what I see, and in addition, I get complaints from citizens, ex-law enforcement, other attorneys, other news media on a weekly basis. They will forward me their records denials, and my response is always the same. This denial is completely inappropriate. What they're citing is not what they're it doesn't mean what they're claiming it does. You need to find an attorney and challenge this. And rarely does that happen. It's, in my opinion, an absolute travesty what's happening with the Nevada Public Records Act and how it's being handled.
Thank you. I don't believe there's any other question from members here or from Senator Daly in Northern Nevada. So thank you so much for spending your,
Madam Chair.
basically your afternoon. It looks like Senator Daly does have a question. Go ahead, Senator.
Not necessarily a question, just a clarification on what was stated about the 5 days. The law does say that they have to respond in 5 days, but they don't necessarily have to provide the information in 5 days. They do have to give a potential timeline on when they expect they'll be able to provide the information. So they can take more time, but it has to be reasonable and those types of things. And I know our friend here, quoted some of the things about case law and various things. And I've seen those case laws where they say, oh, well, we get this exemption because this is deliberative, and every excuse they can do that. They cite 20 different cases on why they don't have to provide something. Sometimes it holds up, sometimes it doesn't. But what our state law says is that if they deny any records requests, they have to specifically name the statute that makes it exempt. And I've always interpreted that if there's no statute making it exempt, it's not exempt, and all this case law is not applicable in the state of Nevada. And maybe we should have to clear that up. On the other side, what some of the stuff they were saying, public agencies have a lot of tools and weapons to delay in various things. And not that they're all bad. There are people that go and just make information requests, very large ones, give me everything you have on whatever it might be. They couldn't possibly answer it. Really the only tool a public agency has is, well, here's the bill it's going to be. It's going to be $8,000 by the time I make 20,000 pages. And it couldn't possibly be. And they have time that they have to redact and do all of the things. So it's not as simple as that. There are bad actors on both sides, but there are some things that we could clean up and make better. I agree.
Thank you. Members, any additional remarks or questions? All right, Assemblyman De Silva staying quiet on this one. Assemblyman MacArthur, it looks like you have a question? No, I don't. Oh, he said he does not. There was just an issue. He accidentally raised his hand. Thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for joining us. At this time, we are going to go ahead and go to the next item on our agenda, which is